out of the 5 key leaders in David's entire kingdom, imagine ruling over an entire nation, and you list out for all time your 5 key leaders. 2 of them were David's scribes. One was a scribe, the other was a recorder. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment. Here we are, thousands of years later, talking about a guy named David. Why are we talking about a guy named David thousands of years later? Because out of his 5 leaders, 2 of them were doing his social media. Like literally. Like they were people. A scribe was somebody who was writing down the history. A recorder was doing the same. And so imagine your story not being celebrated. Imagine you not remembering your victories because David hired a couple of social media people way back then, like 800 BC or whenever it was he lived. I'll tell you what, we're still talking about him thousands of years later. Hey everybody, I'd like to take a couple of moments today and talk with you about the secret to finding your niche or your niche, depending on how you like to say it. You know, Alex Horowitz, whom I love, he likes to say that riches are in the niches. And so today we're going to be talking about finding your niche, the secret to finding your niche. And so my message today is actually for almost any business person, but particularly I want to speak here today to coaches, to consultants, to thought leaders, to influencers. I want to talk to leaders even, because I think that all of us in life, especially in the kind of career paths that I just outlined, you know, coaches, consultants, you know, thought leaders, people who work with people, leaders, managers. I think that we all in those spaces have an awesome opportunity to focus in, and rather than be a generalist, which really doesn't make you any money, we all have an opportunity to be a specialist, which really allows us to show some unique value and to differentiate ourselves from all the other voices that are out there. And I think that's why Alex Horowitz says that riches are in the niches. Why? Because we've got to find the specialist focus that really allows us to unpack and unlock the unique value that we bring. Now, before I dive into the secret to finding your niche, what I want to actually kind of say is that your greatest adversary when it comes to finding your niche is one word, and here it is. It's overthinking. Now, if there's one thing I've discovered, and I have been privileged, blessed, you name it, to train and certify over 8,000 coaches in 20 different countries around the world. And so if there's one thing I've seen in, 8,000 coaches in all of these places is that they overthink this whole thing about a niche. Now, overthinking is great if you're, building a nuclear bomb and you want to make sure you get it perfectly right because one mistake, you could wipe out millions of people. I totally get it. But if you're just launching your business, overthinking is not very helpful. I mean, when I started my business as a coach, we're going back now over 15 years, I didn't have time to overthink. Why? Because I was desperate to build a business. I was desperate to make an impact. I had lost everything. I didn't have any money. I had a decent job, but because I was supporting 2 households, my ex-wife and my kids and my own household, and my kids were going back and forth between her place and my place, and I wanted to make sure that all of the needs were looked after. You get it. And so I needed to make a lot of money. And so I just didn't have the time to overthink. I needed to act. And I think that when people are overthinking, it's almost like I've just got too much time on my hands, right? And so when I launched my business, there was no overthinking that went into it. I just kind of followed my heart. You know, Napoleon said this. He said that take time to deliberate, but when the time for action has arrived, stop thinking and go in. I love that. Take time to deliberate. So yes, take time to think about it. But when it's time for action, stop thinking and do it. Just go. And so, some of you have been trying to figure out your niche for like 10 years. Some of you have been trying to figure out your niche for 5 years. Some of you have been trying to figure out your niche for 15 years. In other words, you're overthinking it. And that overthinking is leading to what you would call paralysis by analysis. Take time to think things through, but don't use thinking as an excuse to avoid action. That's what I actually think is going on. So many times when we overthink, it's not so much that we're smarter than everybody else. It's that if I can keep thinking about it and analyzing it, then I can use that as an excuse for my lack of action. And so friends, here today, Your greatest adversary when it comes to discovering your niche is overthinking. And so I want to dive, having said that, right into the secret to finding your niche. And I'm going to share with you several principles here today. Are you ready? Here we go. Number one is this. If you're going to discover your niche, you have to know what your passion is. In other words, where is your passion? And you've got to feel it. Okay? I'll tell you what do I mean? I mean that if you're going to be launching a business and setting yourself up as a specialist, serving a particular market or a particular group of people, and you don't have a ton of business experience and you don't have a massive track record and you're not that person who comes with a massive long resume and a massive bank account, if you're just launching into it, I'll tell you what, the place to start is where you're most passionate. Why? Because passion is fuel. And so if you're passionate about wellness, then you go out there and make that your niche. If you're passionate about relationships, then you go after that. If you're passionate about leadership, then you go after that. If you're passionate about helping people to discover their purpose, then you go after that. If you're passionate about helping women to get out of those sort of negative patterns of self-sabotage, then you go after that. Why is passion so important? Because passion is fuel. And I'll tell you what, no business was ever built without the fuel of passion. I'll tell you what, a passionless business is not a business at all. Now, you know, I mean, when Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak launched Apple, they had passion for the technology, passion to make the technology simple. When Colonel Sanders launched KFC, he had passion for his chicken recipe. I'll tell you what, you can see, you know, passion over and over and over again in the most successful entrepreneurs. It's not that they start with the best idea. It's that they start with a passion. So can you dig deep and determine what your passion is? The second secret to finding your niche is purpose. So if the first thing is passion, which is where is my passion, the second is what is my purpose? And so my passion, I got to feel it, but my purpose, I've got to see it. Now, oftentimes people get passion and purpose mixed up. And I'm going to do my best to try to give you a bit of a differentiation. If you wanted me to help you to understand the difference between passion and purpose, here's what I think. I think that your passion is your emotional reason why. It's your emotional reason why. Whereas your purpose is your logical reason why. And I don't think that there needs to be these two things at odds. Let me explain. You might say, well, I'm really, really passionate about knitting. You know what I mean? But where the logic comes in is, can you knit in such a way that you can make money doing your knitting? And if you can, all the power to you. You go after it. Maybe you can teach knitting. Maybe you can hold knitting classes. Maybe you can build an online course around that. But most people, even if they love knitting, will struggle to monetize knitting. Now, you might be the exception. And again, if you are, all the power to you. You see, so I am, as a human being, and you are too, passionate about a really wide range of things. But what your purpose does is allows you to think logically, okay, where is the monetization in this? I've got to be able to see it. If I can't see it, then I won't be able to sell it. If I can't see it, no one else will see it. And then I won't be able to sell it. And so again, start with passion, but then move to purpose. The third secret to finding your niche is to ask yourself this question: people, who are your people? Now, I think that this is where we move, and you've got to know it, right? So your passion, you feel. Your purpose, you see. But the people, you know. And this, what I mean by that is, who do you resonate with? I'm not here so much talking about demographic, like, well, I'm a woman, therefore I'm going to help women, or I'm a guy, therefore I help guys. I mean, that might be part of your niche, but I'm here more talking about your psychographic sort of aspirational sort of connection to people. In other words, how are you resonating with people? And you've got to find those people. I'll tell you what, you've got to find the people who are resonating with your market. You've got to find the people who actually hear your voice and who are identifying with what it is you are talking about. So if somebody says, well, I'm going to go into the niche of health and wellness, okay, great. But you've got to then find the people that you can most effectively communicate that message to, because of course the health and wellness industry is hundreds of billions of dollars in terms of size, and there's all kinds of sub-markets within that large market. And so where is the niche for you in terms of the people that you're going to serve? So start with passion, move to purpose, and then start to ask yourself, who are the people that I can serve? And that takes me to number 4, which is pain. Now, what do I mean by this? You and I have suffered in different areas of our lives. We've all suffered. It might be the suffering of launching your first business. It might be the suffering of losing some weight. It might be the suffering of ending a relationship. It might be the suffering of starting a new relationship. It might be the suffering of launching a business. I mean, you name it. We've all got our areas where we suffer. Now, when I think about my niche, what I think is, if I honor the pain that I've walked through, now I have a solution that I can offer to somebody else. And I hope that makes sense for you. Okay, I'm going to say that again. If I know the pain that I've walked through, now what I might have is a solution that I can offer to someone else. You see, and all of the sudden, now I'm not just speaking from my head, but I'm also speaking from my heart. I'm going to be resonating with a deeper audience because I'm pulling on the pain of the lived experience that I have. I'll tell you what, you've experienced pain. And how do you monetize your pain? Well, you turn it into a solution that you can use to benefit or help someone else. That, I think, ultimately is the purpose of your pain. I mean, if you were God, why would you set up a universe with pain? You know, I mean, I think it's not because he's a masochist or some kind of sadist. I think it's because it's through the pain that we can actually discover solutions for other people, because it's not all about you. The circle of life is that you're a part of this whole thing called the universe, called humanity, called the human community. And it's not just about you living pain-free, because if you live pain-free, then somebody else is going to have to suffer so that you can live pain-free. And that's not fair. So we all got to kind of take our share of the pain here. But if we do it right, if we walk and find the purpose in our pain, and you can see another video that I shot about that, then I'll tell you what, you can actually use your pain to serve other people. So you start, like I said, with your passion. You move from there to your purpose. You start to think about the people that you can serve. And then you look at the pain that you've walked through. And number 5 is you start to think about the progress that you've made in your life. And so where have you overcome? Now, I want to sort of layer a concept for you here today. You have overcome an unbelievable amount of adversity already. I know there's still adversity that you're trying to overcome right now, as am I. But you have already overcome an unbelievable amount of adversity. And so your niche should not flow out of some kind of academic exercise that you studied or researched. I mean, that's why academics are losing, to some degree, so much credibility. Absolutely, mainstream journalists are. It's not because they're bad people. It's because they're just talking about things that they actually have no lived experience in. They don't have any progress. So, I mean, imagine me. Years ago in my life, I used to smoke. I don't offer courses on how to quit smoking. I haven't monetized that progress in my life, but I could if I wanted to. It's not really something that I'm passionate about. I'm so glad that I don't smoke anymore. But imagine if I was still smoking and I was offering classes on how to quit smoking. like how many of you would think that that's like just stupid? But not only is it stupid, it lacks integrity. You see, there's got to come an integrity in our lives where we begin to speak not just out of somebody's online course that we took, or not just out of somebody's, sort of book that we read, but that we've actually made progress in an area of our life. Now, no, you may not be a person who's like up there with Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and all of these titans. Of course, that's fine. Okay, but where have you made progress? when I went through my crash in my early 30s and lost everything, including my marriage, including my friends, including my job, including my finances, including so many other things, I'll tell you what, I launched my coaching business in the ashes of my most painful moment. Do you want to know why? Can I just tell you straight up? I've shared this with audiences literally all over the world, is that I knew that there was people out there who were more messed up than me, right? As bad as I was, and I was really bad, there was people out there, because I had worked with them, who were even worse than me. And so I decided to launch my coaching business looking for the most broken among the broken, the most hurting among the hurting. And sure, some of them had nice polish, and they had great makeup, and they didn't look like they were so hurt, and they didn't look like they were so broken. But you know what? It takes one to know one. I could see beyond the veneer. I could see beyond the Photoshop. I could see beyond the photo filter. I could see them unfiltered. I could see them authentically. And that allowed me to target those people. And when I would look them in the eye, I would say, look, I have been where you are. I can help you get from where you are to where you want to be because I understand the journey that you're in. Now, in every one of our lives, we've got those things that we've overcome. But you know what? Here's the problem. We forget to remember. Okay? What do I mean? We forget to remember. We forget to remember all of the things that we've accomplished. You see, if you don't celebrate your progress, who will? If you don't celebrate your wins, who will? If you don't celebrate the victories in your life, who will? Now, I'm going to give a Bible reference for some of you who might like Bible reference. Some of you went to Sunday school. Some of you may teach Sunday school. Some of you may read the Bible. Even if you hadn't, you probably have heard the story of a guy named David who one day took down another guy named Goliath. Now, David was like a 15-year-old kid playing with his PS4, do you know what I mean, or his Game Boy or whatever he was into. And one day he heard about this giant, this 8-foot-tall beast, and he went out there with his sling and he knocked him down. Now, after that victory, David became the king. And there's this really obscure verse in the Bible. I'm all about obscure verses, okay? Because, you know, I just think that there's a lot of wisdom sometimes in the hidden treasures, right? And it's really interesting because David then became the king when he got older. So by the time he was 30, he became the king. And interestingly, there's a verse that talks about the cabinet or the leadership team that he had around him. And that verse actually says that David reigned over all of Israel and he administered judgment and justice. This is in 2 Samuel chapter 8, for those of you who want to nerd out on that. It says that he administered judgment and justice to all the people. And then it names the leaders. So there was a guy named Job, who was over the army. There was a guy named Jehoshaphat, who was a recorder. Okay? There was a guy named Zadok, who was in charge of the priests. And there was a guy named Sariah, who was a scribe. Okay, so we got a guy who's over the army. We got a guy who's over the priests. We got a guy who's a recorder. We got a guy who's a scribe, and one more guy. And that guy, I'm not going to say his name because I probably can't pronounce it properly, but he was in charge of the bodyguard, the king's bodyguard. So he was like David's, head of his secret service kind of a thing. But what am I pointing out? Out of the 5 key leaders in David's entire kingdom, imagine ruling over an entire nation. And you list out for all time your 5 key leaders. 2 of them were David's scribes. One was a scribe, the other was a recorder. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment. Here we are, thousands of years later, talking about a guy named David. Why are we talking about a guy named David thousands of years later? Because out of his 5 leaders, 2 of them were doing his social media. Like literally. Like they were people. A scribe was somebody who was writing down the history. A recorder was doing the same. And so imagine your story not being celebrated. Imagine you not remembering your victories because David hired a couple of social media people way back then, like 700-800 BC or whenever it was he lived. I'll tell you what, we're still talking about him thousands of years later. David not only celebrated his victories, but if you know the story of David, he also allowed his scribes, his social media people, to describe his defeats. This is really interesting to me. I'll tell you, that's one of the reasons I believe the Bible to be true, not to go off on a tangent, because the greatest leaders in the Bible, it doesn't just talk about their successes, it actually humanizes them. It talks about their failures. But that's another story for another day. The reality is that you and I are on this journey called life. And our journey is filled with successes that we're not recording. And it's also filled with failures that we're not recording. Why would I record my failures? So that I can learn from them. Why would I record my successes? So that I can celebrate them. Now, how does all of this tie back into finding your niche? Well, if you don't celebrate your progress, who will? And so finding your niche, you start with your passion, and that's what you feel. And then you move from there to your purpose. And that's kind of your logical sort of emotional core reason why. And then you go from there to who are my people? And then we go from there to, of course, the whole idea of what pain have I walked through? And then we start looking at all the areas of our lives where we've made progress. But if you're not celebrating your progress, if you're not honoring yourself by looking at the areas, it could just be you lost 12 pounds when you set a goal to do that. It could just be that you've got a solid meal plan. It could just be that you're working out every day. It could just be that you're learning to budget. It could just be that you paid off some credit card debt. Stop comparing your wins to somebody else's, because there's riches in the niches. And if you know the areas where you've made progress, now you're qualified to offer a solution to somebody else. But if you don't see and know where you've made progress, then you're not qualified to offer a solution to somebody else. I mean, some people are like, man, Alex Horowitz, he's just taken off so much in the last couple of years. Wow, I wonder how that happened. Well, I'll tell you how it happened. Like any half-brain knows how it happened. He just crushed it in business. And the reason people listen to him is not so much because his graphics are so great or because, he looks good in a tank top or whatever. All of those things can help. But it's because when he talks, you know that he knows what he's talking about. He's not just a talking head. Because the world is filled with those people. And we don't want those people. We've got enough of them. What you want to start doing is doing what Alex is doing. And that's talking from the experience that you have. As a coach, as a speaker, as a business person, I don't teach things I don't know. Why would I do that? There's no integrity in that. But you better believe I'm going to teach what I know. You better believe that that's where my niche is going to be. Why? Because I've made progress in that area. And so let me give you the sixth key to finding your niche. And I think this one is beautiful. It's this. Now that I know where my progress is, how then do I turn that into a process? Okay. So a process is a step-by-step solution. And so imagine if I had made progress. I'll use that example of quitting smoking, let's just say. If I actually wanted to monetize that, and I could actually spell out the step-by-step journey that I took to quit smoking. Now, I quit over 30 years ago, but it was so hard for me to quit, true story, that if I needed to describe, step 1 was this, step 2 was that, step 3 was this, step 4 was that. And then what do? I put a bow around it. I spend time trying to pretty it up, trying to make those steps creative, package it up some way, and then I could monetize it. Now, I'm not going to do that. But it's amazing that my progress was as the result of my process. And so part of celebrating your progress is to start to unpack your process. What is your process? How did you build that business? How did you become a better parent? What were the steps that you took to get your finances in order? How did you improve your mental health? How did you improve your physical health? And I mean, step 1, step 2. You always want to think that if this is the destination that you're aiming for, like let's just say it's like way over here, you always want to imagine that the person you're trying to help, the customer that you care about, is like way down here. Not like from a worth perspective, not at all, but in terms of their journey. And you want to imagine that you're helping them to get from where they are to where they want to be. Just like Frodo was looking to, throw the ring in Mount Mordor or whatever it was, and he was like way over here, but he needed to get to here. And boy, it would have been nice if somebody gave him a step-by-step map. And they made a whole book series out of it, and billion-dollar movies and all of that to outline the process. What's your process? Can you create a step-by-step process? This is so important. If you don't describe your process, who will? Really, really important. So as I close this here today, I believe in you. I believe that there is a calling upon your life. I believe that you're meant to help people. I believe you're meant to build a great business. I believe that you're meant to make a massive impact for good on this planet, but not without a niche. Riches are in the niches. And so how do you discover your niche? Well, number 1, passion. Number 2, purpose. Number 3, people. Number 4, pain. Number 5, progress. And number 6, process. I hope that's been helpful to you. And boy, I'll tell you what, at Certified Flourishing Coaching, we would love to work with you. But before I ask you to work with us, would you check out a free online course that we have for you? This is our gift to you. You can go to failuretoflourishing.com and you can find out a little bit about us and find out if we're worthy of your attention, if we're worthy of your engagement, if we're worthy of your support. And if you go through that online course, and I know you're going to love it, then I encourage you then to reach out. I'd love to hop on a call with you personally. Thanks so much for tuning in. That's failuretoflourishing.com. Riches are in the niches. So go out there and discover your niche. Thanks for tuning in.